Everyone, welcome to today's video. Welcome to the Video Game Fight School channel. Thank you so much for tuning in. So today we're going to be talking about the villainy of Gotham Knights. For the most part, we have, I think, an idea of about 3 or maybe even 4 villains that will be appearing in Gotham Knights. I know for certain we have seen 2, and even the developers have actually come out to say that they are actually excited to show us one of the villains, which is, I think, the main villain group in Gotham Knights, which is the Court of Owls. Now, on the Discord server for Gotham Knights, there are a lot of conversations going on the theory channels, and even some of the different discussions and questions and answers between fans and between members of the Discord. And something that has really come up in different pockets of discussions that I've noticed is the villainy of Gotham Knights is largely unknown. Now, before I even jump any further into this video, I just wanted to go ahead and make sure that I state this, and I think I'll state this in many videos, so bear with me. You see, Gotham Knights is going to have to live in the shadow of the Arkham games. Now, it's not necessarily that the Arkham games are better. We haven't played Gotham Knights, so we don't know. It's more that the entire story and the origins of the Gotham Knights stems from Batman himself. If there is no Batman, there is no Robin, no Batgirl, no Red Hood, and there sure as heck is no Nightwing. I know, some people wish that Nightwing existed by himself, but you guys understand exactly where I'm coming from. So largely, Gotham Knights is kind of a Batman extension game. But at the end of the day, one thing that's really important and one thing that's really interesting is the rogue gallery in terms of the Batman game is something that a lot of us would be very interested in actually seeing. And how this is going to be structured is also very interesting. So let's take, for instance, the last game that Warner Brothers Games Montreal made, which was Batman Arkham Origins. In that game, you had Black Mask as one of the villains, you had Killer Croc, you had Electrocutioner, you had Deathstroke, you had Copperhead, you had Shiva, Deathshot, you have Firefly. Now, these villains, in my opinion, were actually a very good selection of villains. The only thing I just wish is that they did a kind of a bang-up job in terms of how you encountered the villains 100% of the time. Now, yes, they did do a good job in the encounters of the villains. I mean, the Deathstroke fight in that prison ship or whatever it is was quite interesting. Even though, yes, some people may go and argue about the combat, but it was something that was quite unique. We hadn't seen much of that kind of very close quarters combat with an iconic villain that had been done in that sense. In fact, everything else was more cerebral, and yeah, I mean, you can also kind of point to maybe even the Mr. Freeze fight in Arkham City at the GCPD station. That was also a really nice, wonderful fight sequence, which was not necessarily hand-to-hand, but you trying to outsmart Mr. Freeze, if you got what I mean. And then, you also had Enigma, you had Anarchy, you also had the Joker, which was very interesting. And then you had some of the, Mad Hatter, and then you also had Bane. And this was just one game made by Warner Brothers Games Montreal. So I think a lot of people are expecting some other villains in terms of the Gotham Knights game, and more than likely, I think they're expecting villainy in terms of volume and in terms of, obscurity in a sense. And when I say obscurity, let's put that in quotations. So what do I mean by that? I mean villains that have not necessarily been featured in any of the former Arkham games, and I think this is what a lot of people are looking forward to. In fact, in the conversation, some people have mentioned some of the villains like Killer Moth, and I thought to myself, man, that's actually really interesting, because that is a villain that has been really, really obscure for the longest time. There had been some Easter eggs in past Arkham games about some other villains, but it will be nice for some of us to be able to see that gallery of villains that are all the way out there. Now, the good thing, too, is because there have been multiple Arkham games, you have seen a bigger gallery. I mean, I'm not going to try to ignore Poison Ivy. I'm not going to try to ignore, Two-Face. I'm not going to try to ignore Scarecrow, say maybe even in the Injustice games as well, and even in Arkham Knight. I mean, we've seen them in a sense, but I don't think they necessarily dug in deep into their story to kind of satisfy exactly what the audience is looking for in some of the Arkham games. They were just really interesting highlights. So Gotham Knights is an opportunity for them to be able to do some really cool stuff like that. Take those villains that didn't necessarily get in any much of a deep story and kind of drive, a very huge arc with them in order for the player base to be able to enjoy them. Now, I know we saw Mr. Freeze. Mr. Freeze is going to be in Gotham Knights, and, we've seen Mr. Freeze a lot, and to be honest, I wish Mr. Freeze was not in Gotham Knights at this rate. He is a solid villain, don't get me wrong, but he's a villain that's been there for, Arkham City. He was there in Arkham Origins, he was there in Arkham Knight. In fact, he had his own DLC in Arkham Origins, a Cold Heart DLC. And so at this stage, I think perhaps it could be wise to have another villain come maybe front and center in terms of a side main villain. And, you know, we already know Court of Owls is the main villain, but, you know, this is something that a lot of the audience is probably looking forward to seeing. But with DC Fandom event coming, it's probably one of those things where we're more than likely going to be seeing some hint about the other villains. Maybe even if they don't show a lot at the event, maybe if they focus on just the Court of Owls, they may start dripping a little bit of those other villains within the game and maybe hide some that we'll probably not see till we actually fire up the game. But do me a favor, in the comment section, list maybe your top 3 villains that you would love to see in the Gotham Knights game at release. Thank you so much for your time and audience. If you enjoyed the content, please let me know. You can like, you can subscribe, whatever it is you want to do to join the conversation. I'd really appreciate it. And thank you very much for listening to the video. Peace out.